This isn't going to be the typical kind of video that's uploaded to this channel. If this kind of video, the kind that consists of me just talking, doesn't interest you, don't worry, because videos like this are in no way going to become the norm on this channel. So, in the small conservative town I grew up in, there was something I noticed as a child that I assume was prevalent throughout the rest of the country. The morality of pop culture and what was and wasn't appropriate for children, or sometimes for anyone, was decided by the church-going mothers. Women of every age participated in the act of crossing out things with red ink, but the most outspoken of them, and therefore the ones who set the course, were usually those with young children, so women in their mid-20s to late 30s. During the 90s and early 2000s, it was these overly involved Christian mothers who dominated the conversation on what was best for the children. But they weren't just attempting to police the content for their own children or children in general, they really were talking about all of society. Now, a little of this is natural and even necessary, but these Christian women took it too far. They saw themselves as the arbiters of good and evil. Now, not all the women were like this, not even close, but the ones that were the loudest. So they were the ones everyone heard and unfortunately listened to, even if only for the purpose of getting them to shut up. Either way, whatever these women believed is what everyone else had to believe, or pretend to believe. There were all sorts of immoral trends that I lived through. There was Grand Theft Auto, there was Eminem, raunchy teen comedy movies, skateboarding, and the culture of vandalism they thought it promoted. This month, the children need to be sheltered from Jackass and MTV. Next month, it's Limp Bizkit. Month after that, it's Beavis and Butthead. These trends and the outrage from the Christian mothers that followed came and went. But, and this just may be my subjective experience here, there were a couple of constants. There were a few naughty things that the Christian mothers hated so much, they complained about them from the moment they became aware of them, and continued complaining for, I don't even know how long. Marilyn Manson, J.K. Rowling, and South Park. Or maybe not South Park specifically, but that crude, dark, swear word-filled, offensive style of humor that South Park set the standard for. Marilyn Manson, with his album Antichrist Superstar, was vulgar and wild and, above all else, dared to explicitly mock and defy the religion of the time. To the Christian mothers, he was a corrupter, a beacon of anti-authority and Satanism. And J.K. Rowling? She may as well have been the devil himself, because that's what the Christian mothers thought Harry Potter was all about. Witchcraft, the tool of the devil. Harry Potter wasn't a fantasy novel for young children. No, it was a how-to guide for devil worship because it had wizards and witchcraft in it. Now, of course, The Lord of the Rings had wizards and witchcraft in it, but that was fine because it was a different, non-satanic form of witchcraft. The mothers knew that Lord of the Rings witchcraft was benign because they actually bothered to read it, because when they were children, it was something that children read, probably to the dismay of many of their parents, but you get the point. And then, of course, the Christian mothers of the 90s hated South Park and all of the edgy comedy content that aired on that godforsaken station, Comedy Central. Often it too was anti-Christian, or if not this, it was too offensive in general. Jeff Foxworthy was fine, and Bob and Tom on the radio were kosher to some of them, but if you listen to anything much harder than that, then you were venturing into territory of heresy. It doesn't matter if it's a joke or has a purpose. What's dirty is dirty. We should always be polite and say things that are sanitized and politically correct as possible. But it's not like they could outright ban any of these things. This is America, after all. I mean, they still tried, but it was kind of a lost cause for them. They couldn't stop these evil people from spreading their sin, but they could at least stop their children from consuming. They failed at this too, by the way. Okay, but before moving any further into this video or speech or essay or whatever thing this is, it's time for some preemptive self-defense. I know the direction I'm about to take this video is going to trigger some of you. So far, I'm sure most of you have been fine with me criticizing the Christian women from the 90s because critiquing the mainstream ideologies of the past, everybody loves. But when you start talking about the present and the problems with the ideologies people currently align with, people start getting upset. For a lot of people, one's political ideology is, unfortunately, a pretty major aspect of their identity. Well, it's the side I'm on. It's what I believe, what I am. So it must be the right side. It must be true. My political camp, you see, it's the one that's finally cracked the code. Human understanding of morality and culture and economics is basically done evolving. The group that I'm in will be everlasting, eternally on the right side of history. No corruption or fraud or hypocrisy to be found within it whatsoever. We can say these types of things and act like modern ideologies aren't going to be trampled over and mocked and replaced by others in the future. We can act like Donald Trump cared about the stability of America more than his own ego. We can act like Joe Biden has at least a high school reading level. We can act like Adam Driver is attractive. We can act like George Floyd was a beautiful, perfect saint of a human being who did no wrong and wasn't simply a victim of a timely tragedy and made into a martyr by an opportunistic media solely for disingenuous political purposes. But how we act and how we feel has no effect on what's true. Okay, that just did it, right? Like, that definitely upset a few of you. I hope by this point you're aware that my questioning of one side's viewpoint doesn't mean I automatically accept the viewpoint of the other. To have a decent discussion about anything at all, you must approach with a little bit of nuance, which is kind of just another way of, me saying that usually both sides are sort of wrong. No, I'm not saying they're equally wrong, but still, both sides are wrong and both sides will change. No political group or ideology is ever 100% correct. And everyone lies too. Everyone pretends to care way more than they actually do. Everyone is kind of selfish. We may come from slightly differing views on life, but at the end of the day, we all just want to find love and climb higher and collect more and eat good food and have as many preferably non-self-induced orgasms as possible before the oblivion we're all pretending isn't approaching finally approaches. Okay, back to what I was saying about those nagging Christian women from the 90s who valued political correctness more than free speech. To these overprotective and outspoken women, Marilyn Manson, J.K. Rowling, and edgy comedy were the recurring primary threats to the social fabric of America. But here's where we get to the actual point. You see, my friend Alex and I noticed something a few months ago. Many young women today, many of whom were the daughters of these overprotective conservative mothers in the 90s, they've grown to rebel against by becoming a modern leftist, the supposed opposite of their parents' ideology. These modern women, they too have some interesting opinions of the criminals on this list. I'm sure you see where I'm going with this. In my opinion, the loudest and most annoying of the modern females in their 20s to late 30s are those who patrol the internet and culture at large for seemingly no other reason but to find things to be offended by and complain about. They search for bigotry of all kinds, and they have a special talent for finding it in everything. These females, they too see Marilyn Manson and J.K. Rowling in politically incorrect humor as enemies to their ideology. Except the modern generation of the most annoying females among us see Marilyn Manson not as a devil worshipper, but as a rapist, a practitioner of everything anti-woman. They too think J.K. Rowling is a mouthpiece for evil, but not Satan, for bigotry. And of course, according to these same women, the ritual of sin that is edgy comedy is, well, they hate edgy comedy for pretty much the same reasons their mothers did. They're boring and a little dense and can't help but have terrible senses of humor. While they claim it's for different reasons, these new women ended up hating the same things that the old ones did. But really, at least as far as I can tell, the new women actually don't hate Marilyn Manson and J.K. Rowling for different reasons at all. They hate them because they've defied the dominant religion of the time. Marilyn Manson and J.K. Rowling have crawled into bed with the demons, with the bad guys from the religious text. No, I'm not saying that the religion of social justice is as illogical as the magical stories in the Bible. The Christian women fear the devil, while the modern women fear rape and racism. The devil isn't real, while rape and racism unfortunately are and absolutely should be rallied against. Marilyn Manson couldn't have been a legitimate beacon to the devil because that's impossible, but he can be an actual rapist. The thing is, though, he's not a rapist. He's been an asshole to some women, but that doesn't at all mean he's a rapist. J.K. Rowling's modern sin is bigotry. Now, being a bigot is certainly a possibility in today's world. The new religion has at least found a more productive antagonist, but this doesn't matter because J.K. Rowling doesn't fit the definition. You can disagree with her, but claiming that the woman has nothing but hate in her heart for the trans community is just ridiculous. Is it as ridiculous as her children's book summoning the devil? Well, no. Not even close. But as different as they are, the two strategies in demonizing J.K. Rowling might as well be the same because they're both based on information that simply isn't true. To the moms of the 90s, there was no convincing them that Harry Potter wasn't satanic because those women saw Satan in their soup. Satan could be behind anything. The definition of Satan was expanded into whatever and whoever the women needed it to be, much like how the modern definitions of sexual assault and bigotry have been expanded to entrap anyone who dares give the slightest amount of protest to the dominant religion of our time. What I'm trying to say here is that this modern SJW army of angry women is this decade's version of the overprotective mothers of the 90s. The 90s women had church, these new women have Twitter. While the strategy and flavor of these two groups is different, the source of their outrage and the personality faults that forge it are the same. The women of both past and present groups are the most basic or bored amongst their peers. They are the ones who are the loudest and the ones most ideologically possessed by the trending religion of the time. The constant poison here is humanity's gullibility and addiction to the tribalism that religion can often foster. The church tells the women what to fear, and the women abide as if it was their purpose for existing. The only difference is the women of the 90s told themselves they were doing it for their children, while most of these modern women don't have any children to justify their zealousness. They claim to act not for the protection of their own offspring, but the protection of society in general, and for those within it most oppressed. To the new religious woman, the people of color, the differently abled, the LGBT community, the whoever must be protected from sin. So, if you think about it, it kind of seems that from the perspective of the most extreme members of the new religion of wokeness, it's as if these marginalized groups aren't people to be treated equal, but children in need of monitoring, whose ears and eyes need sheltering from all the nastiness of the world. According to these women of the new religion, these marginalized groups, much like children, are incapable of navigating the unsavory on their own. Maybe mothering their fancy dogs and spoiled house cats didn't quite scratch the itch. But I don't know. And I mean, what else can we expect from a generation of adults raised by people who legitimately thought the creator of the universe actively cared about swear words and music? Now, I'm not saying that all of these outspoken women on Twitter are bad people, much like how I don't think the women protesting Eminem were bad people. They thought they were doing the right thing. They thought they were fighting evil people and evil forces. However, do you think any of these women actually bothered to read Harry Potter? No. They were told these works were about devil worship, and they believed it. Now, do you think any of the people today calling Dave Chappelle a transphobe or Joe Rogan a racist, do you think any of them have ever researched their comedy for themselves? Most likely not. Why would they need to? The digital religious clerics have already told them what to think. The Christian woman of the 90s was told and convinced by her church that Noah built a boat to survive a global flood that there's no geological evidence for, and on that boat he fit millions and millions of species. The new religious woman has been convinced Twin Peaks is a good show. The Christian woman believed in a 6,000-year-old Earth, Adam and Eve, Moses' magical staff, angels and demons, in fantasy. The new religious woman believes in astrology, the power of sage, the body positivity movement, in fantasy. The Christian woman was convinced humans were separate from animals, convinced to deny human nature. The modern woman is persuaded to take part in a similar style of denial by placing all our inherent faults at the feet of capitalism, rather than the selfishness built into human nature that spawned it. What it all comes down to is this. People just do and think whatever is required of them to fit in. There are church activities to be included in and shares and likes on social media to be collected. Religious ideology is something people will always cling to, whether it's based on the supernatural or Huffington Post hyperbole. So it's okay. If you find yourself hating a group of people who you know nothing about and justifying it to yourself by saying you're protecting another group of people you know nothing about, it probably means you've got a bit longer to go before you reach the best opinion possible. But if you're still compelled to share your opinion, even if you know you don't know what you're talking about, just don't be so aggressive about it. I promise you, whatever it is, it doesn't matter nearly as much as you think it does. Take the content of this video, for example. I think it's pretty important, but deep down I have to admit, I know it's probably not. This entire video probably comes across preachy and pretentious and annoying. Most people probably won't even watch this far into it, let alone share it, but the video's impact isn't really my concern. I mean, as much as I'd love for this video to make a splash or whatever, it's not what this is for. It's not what this is. This is about me. I like writing. I like talking. I like discussion. I like attention. The difference between me and the Twitter crusaders of the new religion is that I can at least admit why I'm doing it. Thank you for watching. Like and share and subscribe and all that stuff. And let's see if we can invent a new disease in the comments section.